the work session to order. Commissioner Jordan. Let's see if we can do the roll.
Oh, okay. Is Dick Bennett here?
Somewhere here.
Cindy Kendall? Betsy Harding, yes. Todd Badger?
Here.
John Allen? Pete Davis? And Sarah Kimball. I'm here.
Very well done.
Thank you. I remembered everybody's name.
It's tense though, you know?
It is. You're under pressure.
Am I under
Under pressure.
pressure? This is how many.
No, the real trick is can you name everybody that's not here that's supposed to
I have names for everybody that's
Well, I take. Be careful.
So we're not going to do minutes or anything of the previous work session. And I have to report that I've been pilfered. I had a copy of the original survey and the analysis that I brought to this meeting place. And now I don't have them.
You got it?
Copy.
He has
So-
a copy.
So make copies of them.
You know, I found that the one I had on my computer, something's gone awry with it, and some elements of it were just totally different. You couldn't, they were illegible.
Maybe
Were
it's
they
not
in English?
They were mostly in English.
Did you decide what
Does anybody need a copy of the build out?
Yeah,
The next
I did.
one. Yep. So,
Oh.
give that
Oh,
back
there you go.
to
You got
the
it.
general portion.
Well, I'm going to leave all my copies of the build-out analysis right here in this room because I think that's where they'll be used.
And I also have an extra copy of the analysis of the survey that was done in 2002. Now, the one, I have one that's bound, and there's this one that is not bound, and I didn't double check to make sure it's all the same. I think it is.
It's not used to cancel it.
So if anyone needs a copy of that for working on survey. And I have a copy of the actual survey, which has been written all over.
Put that somewhere.
I think some of these notes are from when we last worked at, here, such as deleting things like the library should be in a larger building, et cetera. Maybe that's what you're talking about.
Got a warrant right off the press.
Thank you.
Thought I was gonna have my last wood stove fire.
I
About a
have
month
mine
ago.
going.
Oh, yeah, freezing.
I got one just before I left.
Oh, see, this has that same thing that mine has, where at number 11, is quite bizarre. The E,
Oh, yeah. Sometimes.
exactly. On the second
Right.
page, at number
Foreign,
11.
that's for about foreign people.
Yes.
I fill this up.
Is that the one that you sent?
It might be, I don't know. That's what's on my computer.
I don't remember seeing it that way originally.
No,
Retired again, but I haven't stopped English, so I'll always have to work. I just-
right,
Paragraph B, no, I'm not sure which.
oh, the second page. No, not the new one, is that the new one that I sent around?
Yeah.
Okay, so right here, what's all that carbon copy with?
Comments, Ann?
Right before the break.
Sabotage.
Accident.
No, I think it's the aliens trying to.
Pass out of Kenny.
You see the big A there? I think that's A.
They signed it?
Oh, the crossroad. That's what I think,
No, no, right up on the floor. Just say something. Let's see, we're gonna get that idea later. Specify with your circle one. Truth. Geez, in Manchester, the city of Berlin is doing some of that thing for the city, and their tax rate, are you ready for this? Is going up to $34.75. It was high before, that's terrible.
Okay, so how would we proceed with our analysis of the original survey? Oh, this is not.
Political correctness correction, G6G, I feel like I have a bingo power, G6. Junior high, you gotta call it middle high school, or middle school, middle school,
Not little eye?
not little high.
A little
Middle school.
Would you rate the following community functions? Okay, if we're right there looking at that, are there more community functions to add to that list? Are there community functions to take off that list?
You know, one thing I'd like us to consider is really revising it. North Country Council happened to help Eaton come through with theirs. This is my own copy from the North Country Council.
Make the copies.
But it takes a different approach. It starts right off with some sort of controversial questions and so on. And then I think ends up more with, are you a current Jackson resident and so on. And maybe to get people really responding.
Or start with the questions.
It might be smart to, you know,
Right.
really start involving people and thinking about things right from the get-go.
Right, don't put them off as, well, how long have you been here?
Do you go on or not?
Are you in the bowling alley?
You don't want to scare them off, though.
Well, that's true too.
Well, it's only the first 4 questions, which is simply figuring out, is categorizing.
Yes, but then it goes on to how would you rate, you know, it's more boring kinds of things maybe. Whereas if you really want people to think about their community, you want to start with something more frequent. So what was that?
Should we bring McDonald's into that?
Great idea,
We could just throw some dummy questions just to get them going.
just to get them really thinking about it, sure.
Well, actually, I think you keep going up through number 5, and then you throw a zero in.
Well, that's a good idea.
Because you get them saying, you're thinking, you know, what is it you like about Jackson? And so they're in that mood, and then bring in some issues.
Okay, so you feel, whatever order we ended up putting it in, 1 through 5, do you like the questions?
I think we need that to just be able to figure out.
On the new one, I added in industry, even though I don't really think there is some sort of industry in Jackson, but it may be that some people feel that what they have is some sort of an industry. I mean, R&R woodworkers, for example. I don't know if they consider that an industry.
Yeah, then number one.
That's in number 4.
Okay.
They might call it retail. Wholesale.
Well, it's
It
cottage
says on the
industry, I think
specific.
that's how they,
That's a good idea. Phrase it as cottage industry.
right, because that's how they do it where they do.
With cottage industry on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Instead of just industry.
Right, because when I see the word industry, I think of large factory with smokestacks and everything.
Right, shoe manufacturer, et cetera.
Are you bringing a paper mill to Jackson?
Right.
Okay, and then, so on number 5, are there any other questions you had in there? Which features are important? Rural, low-density population, outdoor recreation,
I don't have a stake yet.
state,
In the new one, I added in views and natural landscape. I don't know if you have the new one, Dick.
No, I don't.
There, though there isn't a state tax, that would still be a reason why you like the tax structure of the area. The
Well,
lack
that's
of-
local taxes.
What?
That's local taxes.
Local
Yeah, but you
state.
might come, if you're a millionaire, you want to come live in Jackson, you don't have to pay any income tax, so if you're, that would might be a suggestion.
And that the idea that the taxes that we do have are property tax, no sales tax,
Meals.
Roman meals, so those are all aspects of taxation.
Do you have something on residence?
We-
We're talking about, there's two different.
Did Julie not get you a copy of what was sent around?
But that's the right copy.
I think you copied this one as
Jackson,
copy.
So it's 13,
Yeah.
14.
Yeah, that's what I
This is the
have.
one I,
Oh.
But she's saying stuff I didn't have.
do you want me to just make a copy of it or what? Okay, great.
And while you're at it, those be, that's the survey we need, and the rest of this was the responses.
All right.
Well, she was saying some things and I
When you
didn't.
handed it down, the whole thing was a survey.
Ah,
No.
That would scare people.
well, and the one that I emailed around was compressed onto, it was really meant to be a legal sheet, and it was compressed way down, so I think very probably we can do it on 2 sides of the legal sheet if we do it well. But it might end up that we want to have it longer.
So this copy is what, just of the new one? I'm confused as to why.
Well, me
There's
too.
one that says 2013-14.
Yeah.
The older one, and then there's one that Betsy.
Yeah, see, that's what
It changes.
Managed to,
Oh,
just
okay.
I've got,
So John.
We got this, right?
This one.
yeah, that's the one you made
Yeah.
before. I looked at the one online, but I didn't print that.
So John's gonna bring that back in.
She was reading.
I think we'll find.
Okay, good.
And what did you add on 5 was views?
Oh, yeah, on 5 I put in, oh dear.
Views,
John
natural,
has it. John's got
views,
it.
natural landscape, and then current levels of state local school taxes. And we're talking about maybe not just tax.
Just tax
Current tax levels or something.
Yeah.
Structure.
Structure.
There should be a current state, local tax structure.
Yeah.
Because if you just say tax structure, it would include federal.
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I don't think you need to say school taxes, that's part of local taxes.
Okay.
You sure?
Here.
I'll be taking the orders momentarily.
Who's captured?
Anybody a cocktail?
Thank you.
One from column A, 2 from column B.
Oh, okay.
This is English, right?
This
Yeah.
is
Well, I remember at one point our minutes said that our section 11 was, had too many leading questions. So even though we asked agree, disagree, this is more complete. Strongly agree, agree, no opinion, disagree, strongly agree. So maybe the questions are tense or not to be considered as leading or something.
This is,
So which one are we going to use as our worksheet?
It's a short 2014. The one with the
This
little
14,
type,
the little,
The river thing?
okay.
Okay.
and the other two is now paper notes on it, perhaps.
And it shouldn't say winter 2014, it should
We
be
say
like
2014.
Yeah, just 2014, okay.
Hopefully winter's gone.
that's
From one side.
That's still English.
I still
Hopefully,
have
this
2.5
will
bags of
go out
pellets.
in 2014.
That's all.
That would be my goal. So,
Well,
okay, then, are we on to 6? We're happy with 5. We're wondering about community functions, and how well they work. Now, public access to open
Open
waters.
Yeah.
Jackson has the least amount of open water of any town in the state of New Hampshire. Are we talking to access the
Rivers
Falls, you know, they're saying.
well, that would be,
and
This
There's
was
certain-
Mirror Lake is,
This was in the last one, I don't know why we put it in last time, but,
So is it like boilerplate? I mean, we just.
well, we didn't take it out, I guess.
yeah, Merrill Lake would be.
But
right.
we're not about to close down access to the Wildcat River, you know.
No, there's,
Is it, you know, private land there?
it is all private land.
Mm.
So there is no public or guaranteed access.
Right.
What about the walkway that, you know, from the park down here?
Yeah, the
That's-
falls.
the falls.
Right, I meant more for everybody's fishing.
Yeah.
About the falls.
That's true.
It does seem like a
That's
silly
right.
question to put in there.
Yeah.
We have what we have.
We always felt that you stayed within the banks of the stream, that you walk down the stream and fish it.
Just get, as you get out, jump on the bridge.
Forward.
Yeah, just wait in the banks that way and then
Or wait for a bridge and, climb up there. There are some state regulations on access to, streams.
Well, it's certainly not a service provided by
No, I
Jackson.
don't think so.
So that does seem like a silly thing to put in there.
Okay, let's try to eliminate that one, just for
Yeah,
Oh, we had a dock I didn't know about. Whitney's Pond, maybe?
the boat ramp.
Yeah, we used to do swim lessons up there.
Yeah. I remember when they had them on Tyler, it
Yeah, I
was
remember that
twisted.
too.
Don't you remember the cold?
Yeah, like 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Okay, so that pretty much
Yeah.
covers.
Yeah, sounds good on 6.
And we might put in public library instead of just library, make sure people understand it's a town library.
Is there another one?
No, but I mean,
This is school.
there's the old library building and so on, just so that people understand.
The difference.
Okay.
Town public library. How about town water?
Not everybody's on it.
I know.
No, I don't know what being water for something.
I know, but I just thought there might be another community service.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think if you're not on it, then you might want to, no opinion on that one.
Would you like to put it in though, town water precinct?
Just throwing it out there.
On 7-2, you had the town library down on the bottom.
Right.
Oh,
See what I'm saying?
One's raising, one's more or less.
well, we're gonna eliminate one of those.
Yeah.
Should it come out of
I would-
6 or 7?
Well, they're
Why do you wanna
different
take it out?
questions.
Different questions.
Different questions.
Is your opinion, should you more or
Police
less-
protection's in both, for example, and recycling is in
Okay,
both.
yeah.
Yeah, because you're talking about
should you more or
how
less-
well is it being done and should more attention or funding be focused on.
Well, I don't- that's why I don't think it's necessary. I just don't know.
The first one's rating it.
Well, I mean, it doesn't say, do you want to spend more on the library, it says, do you want more or less?
We feel it's at the town.
Good programs.
Well,
Yeah, it's not suggesting that we'll build a new library or something.
And we have provided a line that says that we're going to add new thoughts. Are we to 8? In your opinion, what role should town officials play in following planning and community development activities?
Are we gonna have any transportation improvement planning?
no. They don't come,
Well, I mean, North Country Council frequently, once every 2 or 3 years has a meeting about transportation planning. There's always Route 16, stuff like that. Do we want to participate or do we not feel it's worth it?
So you mean regional transportation improvement.
Right.
Like,
Well, I know we're not getting service. We don't have the population density
They
to
used to.
make it worthwhile.
No, we,
They've tried it, they've.
And it didn't work.
Things, no.
and then they want us to donate them 3,000, but they won't come into Jackson. Why would you pay for something?
What if I try Captain?
Yeah,
Honestly.
Teresa cannot.
But, I mean, it's always a conversation, there's no need to take it out, really, we're not crunched for space, so
Yeah.
we may as well talk about it, but
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to be a part of the conversation on whether or not we care about Route 16 improvements or, you know, the scenic byways. We were involved recently in the discussion about that.
well, then I'm interpreting transportation improvement in a different way. I don't think it's roads and highways, I think it's access to public
Public
transportation,
transportation.
which is, I think, the more critical need, although it's a really hard one to accommodate because, again, there's not the population density to, you know, other than Harris Taxi.
Harris Taxi.
No, you have the, what is
You got
it?
Vinny now.
That's
Vinny Chevrolet.
And with Danny Biagino and his Volkswagen bus, he'd probably be happy to pick up anybody.
That's one
Just
that's
like that.
a great idea.
That's the blue bus with all the.
Yeah, with all the,
The blue canoe.
our barger too. Well, you can get an upside down pipe out,
Bring your own car.
huh? Yeah. Okay.
All right. Eight.
So the role of the officials, active, inactive, no opinion, they can decide, are there any other things to add in there that you would want to ask people about the role of public officials?
John, you might be the best to judge what kinds of things we should be asking about.
Being a public official.
That's right.
It comes to mind right off the top of my head, but. That was dirty.
So you don't have questions that you're asked?
Most of the budget stuff, that's the biggest thing, is spending money.
Right.
Open space plan, don't you think we have enough?
That's what I'm
Well, we own 85% national forest,
Yeah.
it's open space.
There's a lot of open space.
I mean, maybe that question just isn't useful to keep in there. When you look at the Eaton one, there's, some of their questions are a lot more targeted.
Well, actually, you could combine 7 and 8.
The whole thing.
Well, think about it,
More
7
or
is
less active,
asking
more inactive, yeah.
less attention or funding,
Mm-hmm.
and that's being active. Is paying, to be active about something is to pay attention to it, and actively supporting it, which would be funding it. And so
Yeah, just make it
add of the pertinent ones,
from 8 into 7. Is that what you're saying?
just to combine the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Historic preservation's on both.
Yes, you do have this for, yeah, that's on both, so you could just take it out of 8, or just make one 7.
Yeah, just-
Renumber them.
So, no, well, use 7 and then add anything from 8 that should be on there.
Mm-hmm.
Stop it.
information on both, are you?
Is that, that's reach, do the.
Yeah, that was me,
Yeah.
was feedback.
Mm.
Amplifier.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
You may want to pare it down a little, or group it. Because some of these are,
Well, we can,
community planning, and open space planning, recreation planning.
I think recreation planning should be part of it.
I think
Yeah.
you need open space.
Well, community planning is pretty broad. What are we planning? Because you can plan your transportation, you can plan economic.
Recreation, you.
Right. So I would eliminate community planning for, and then have more specific planning.
Take that out.
So take out on 7, the community plan.
How about raising planning? Is that going to be part of our master plan, or what are we thinking of?
Raise, yeah,
This
Land.
This land.
yeah. I don't, do you want to make it a specific entity in the questionnaire, or it's part of community planning?
Well, I mean, if we're taking out community planning, do we want to put in something about raising,
Well, we're going to then deal with
or town land planning?
recreational planning.
Mhm.
um,
One of the open-ended questions on the east one is number 6. Please list any particular property you consider worthy of special protection or preservation, and we leave it open. And then it generate page 45. Page 6.
Was one more
And a couple of questions I thought were worthy of looking at. I don't know if we take the same format, obviously, but.
Well, I think that Phil Davies is going to help us again in collating the responses, which is a huge help.
Is he going to help us actually in the final
Yeah,
setting up the survey to make it easy to collate?
Yes, he said that once we get it figured out essentially what we want, then he'll look it over and make sure we don't have any, bias in it that can't be corrected, and that it'll be easy enough to collate.
So do you want to add something for future town, whatever would go here is town business, so it's future town development, town lands development, town
Use of
properties.
town, use of town
Use of
properties?
town properties.
Basically, this is it.
Well, there's the old dump too.
What would you do with that? I don't know.
God knows, but, some people may come up with some ideas.
I mean, should those be more open-ended questions?
I-
Approach, I mean, obviously, those lands are the town's responsibility. So it's more a question of
Yeah.
what do you do with them?
Mhm. So we might, as John was suggesting, have one of these open-ended questions, like please list any particular usage you might find for existing town properties, undeveloped existing town properties or something like that.
Well, you don't have to name them because people
Don't know them.
they don't know them by name.
Right.
And there's a lot of people.
Start right up at Prospect Farm, I mean, not that we're gonna develop anything up there, but
Hotel.
recreation.
Yeah.
How to enhance
Existing property.
recreation opportunities up there for town residents. It's a lovely place. It's hard to get to. And then you come down through the notch, and then you have Malone Road. I don't know what to do with it. I don't think it should just be done for waste material.
And personally, I'd leave it alone. I wouldn't want any recreation when they're done.
Well, they've monitored, I know the wells are clean now. I don't know how much.
Are they still
longer.
monitoring them?
Yes,
I think they had to resume.
that's what I can't understand.
Think they
because
resumed
they said
the
2012.
Exhumed the monitoring.
Yeah, and they told us, Bergeron said 2012 it was done, I think I'm there.
We have to go further.
Oh, I do too. But that's what they told us,
Yeah,
John,
I
you know?
remember that, I remember that.
Well, it's that balance between not having to cap it for that expense,
Hmm.
but have the monitor wells, but, you know, at some point, it's gotta be, finished.
I would assume.
But, I mean, if nothing else, just to, grade it out, I mean, I wouldn't leave it as
Yeah, but they
a mess
just
that
said
it is.
so.
Right, and at some point, we're gonna say, okay, let's get the chain link out of there and, you know, just grade it over, not,
We-
let it naturalize, let the, whatever can grow, sumac and knotweed and.
Are we gonna put copy on it?
I see it's going by
Just
that
kidding.
store name. It's coming
Oh,
up
sorry,
by
that's
the
bad,
back.
yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
So they have bamboo shoots. It's not weed.
I know in the north-south road, when they mowed the side of the road, they left the knotweed. They moved around it, so I didn't know if they were trying to cultivate it for the rest of the county or
Or
something.
dig it up and plant it over here.
Yeah, well, because there's knotweed here, folks.
They had, in Manchester, Union last week, they had a woman that made knotweed pie. And just the thought of it was, yeah.
Looks like it's road.
Well, getting back to number 7,
Thank
the combination. What I'm thinking is, instead of just doing the, sort of listing everything, get the more controversial things in that should more or less attention be focused on the following services. I mean, things like first aid, ambulance, I mean, is it there because we want people to say that it's ambulance is not
Is
adequate or not adequate? But people wouldn't really know whether it was adequate or not unless they
Used it.
if they used it.
Well, that's why I have no opinion. I mean, I would answer no opinion on that. I've never used the ambulance, so I wouldn't.
Yeah,
wouldn't
You
have an
wouldn't
opinion on it.
know, right?
or perhaps have a few of those in there so that, to balance the more controversial things. I'm throwing this out there, getting you to brainstorm with it. What do we want to find out from people? And how is that going to affect us, Master?
What I think we're looking for is where to go into the future with zoning, regulations of any kind, you know, where we're gonna go that we don't have now, you know, what are we gonna do that we don't have now?
That would be low-income housing, cluster homes.
That cluster homes.
Well, I mean, more of them, you know, things do. What was that one here?
Well, maybe Easton doesn't have a cluster home.
They do, it actually is number 8 on the questionnaire. Minimum lot size was their big thing too, they were going over.
Well, and what I'm saying is that maybe Easton doesn't have cluster homes.
Right, you mean, that when they did the survey, they didn't have it?
Right,
So they're
they were
asking-
asking if they were, people were in
Yeah.
favor of it.
Yeah,
So since we
Low income
have,
housing would be one, cluster homes, changing the lot size, those would all be zoning things that would.
Yeah, we don't have lot size.
Well, changing the formula or whatever.
another thing, you know, when Tara was here, she was recommending that we have some different zones from what we have now, rather than just the 2 zones. Is there a way we can address
That's
that as
another
part of
one,
the
yeah.
survey?
That's another one, I forgot about that.
I mean- With Easton, for example, they say a mixture of lot sizes in different areas of town is desirable. I'm afraid if we simply threw that question out, people would say, no, we want everything the same. But maybe when they start to think about it, maybe they would want some differences. And Kara says that our way of doing the soils is no longer done in the rest of the state, by any other town, I guess, maybe.
well, no, what she's saying is that our soils,
Right.
minimum lots, it's just a matter of the tables.
Right, it's based on material that's no longer really available.
Right, it should be based on just updated instead of using the chart here today.
Update the soil.
Right, we
New
don't have, you
information
don't
comes
have
along.
to change, don't have to change the regulations, you just have to change the chart that you use to determine.
But she was also suggesting that we consider changing the regulations so that some would be more intensive and some would be less intensive. And is there a way we want to propose that for people to think about?
The question could, open-ended question could be, do you think that there should be areas in town that are more densely developed, that were more, a denser level, for the words out, it would be permitted,
Or greater density would be.
greater density,
Or what about the 16 corridor, making that, from north of Village, make that commercial,
yeah.
user-friendly sort of way.
Yeah, have a rural commercial kind of.
Rural
Right.
commercial.
Well, we
code.
just voted.
Right, I know, but that's, I mean, you can always vote on everything
But-
every year, you know
but
that.
there's- Well, it could be that
I mean,
instead of
any
just
opinion.
changing, lopping off a piece of Route 16, maybe we should sort of step back a bit and look at the whole town the way Tara did and said, well, does it make sense to draw lines in different places and allow certain functions in some zones that are excluded from other zones? And I think we need to, in looking ahead as to what planning board can do, we need to, I think, look back at our zoning ordinance and take care of some of these things, we clean it up, and we still have the permitted and not, use is permitted and use is not permitted clause in there, which means that if something isn't on either list, is it permitted or is it not? So that's, we've known that's a problem, we've known that for years, and we just haven't cleaned it up. So maybe we need to step back and look at the whole picture. And if we did that, it would be useful to have some people's opinion, from the survey, so to kind of back up what you're doing, and if people feel as though,
So what would the question look like?
Yeah.
Well,
Are you in
like I
favor
said-
of,
I'm afraid that if you put it straight out, should we change our zoning lines?
people free?
Yeah, people free. Whenever you put a line on a map,
Right.
you're gonna have problems. But if we were to change zoning,
Change it.
but that's it.
Okay. Should some areas of town be developed with a higher density? Is that part of your question?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, we could change density, and also use is permitted. Are there some areas, put in where, would you favor zoning, I think it's your number 11.
Yeah, encourage business to locate at school.
Right. And maybe not, because you just have two there, retail businesses, small high-tech businesses. Well, what about, just throw out businesses like a web designer or insurance,
Climbing
say,
company.
a climbing company. Well, just any business that is just really confined within the office, you know, an office-type business.
Maximum size person who
Yeah.
can work there. Like we do
Right,
like-
maybe regulations like that, or that, and
So we
not,
permit those things, I think, right now, but do we want to encourage them somehow?
well, no, we don't really commit, in the village area, well,
Right.
Yeah, but you
it's
can,
permitted, or, again, there's a lot of stuff that falls in between that, which is safety. And that, as Tara, she was saying, well, look, you've got all this commercial, grandfathered, non-conforming commercial enterprises in the rural residential. She said, well, you know, maybe you need to look at, you know,
Rural residential.
rural residential, maybe to have, well, maybe we could do like an overlay district where things are, more things are permitted.
So maybe that question number 11 could say something like to encourage businesses to locate or expand outside the village district in Jackson, or within the rural residential district in Jackson, or something like that. Or within
Or would you
parts of
favor
the-
If there are zoning regulations that might encourage,
that
or what,
we could maybe state it so that within the rural residential district, we wouldn't be saying you want to change the zoning, even though we may be thinking there could be areas where we could recommend the zoning be changed. But rather than introduce that concept here where people might,
right, would they
Worry
focus
about
in
it.
on the lines instead of the concept of
mm,
a line?
I like the question, I don't like the two-choice kind of thing, say, you know, leave the question open-ended and let them fill it in.
okay, that's a great
yeah,
idea.
just eliminate those two.
Yeah, because it could be, there's so many possibilities, again, limiting things, so let's leave it open-ended.
What type of businesses, instead of saying would you favor zoning regulations, what, make the focus of the sentence on the businesses or uses, permitted uses.
Would you,
So what types of permitted uses would you choose, would you wish to encourage?
Hacking.
Hacking?
um,
I like it the way it is right now.
I mean, should all this be preceded by a question whether we want to encourage more, economic development in town?
I think that would be the goal, wouldn't it?
And Eaton does that pretty well, I think, at the beginning of theirs.
Limit economic development.
So Eaton's saying current intensity of commercial activity is appropriate, or more commercial activity is appropriate, or current types of commercial activities are desirable, additional ones are desirable. So maybe having a question like that before it would get people thinking.
Okay, so what I heard was should there be some areas in town where blank business will be allowed?
Possible.
And maybe outside
Or
the village district.
Should
because-
there be some new areas
Oh, that's a good way to state it.
in town where, and I don't know if you want to restrict the businesses to square footage, to type of business, or if that line, but business to be allowed.
Yeah, I think at this point, we want to just, people say, well, you know, do you want to have more businesses?
Would be.
Would you be in favor of more businesses?
Yeah, would you be in favor of,
How about back in,
Encouraging more business?
how about back in 5,
Yeah.
make that business, put in business opportunities?
Aha,
Yeah, that's
okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
more business opportunities. So that's.
What features are important
Wide
in
open.
business, yeah, just business opportunities.
And that leaves it wide open.
but I still think
Or
having Dick's
economic-
question in,
Opportunities?
But in 5 is more, it's sort of,
features, objectives.
you are the current, is the current economic opportunity important?
you know,
So what we're just talking about is more, should there be efforts to expand economic development?
yeah, Dick's question was addressing new areas, which I think was a good way to state it.
There's sort of a,
Okay,
should we promote or limit future economic development and just promote one of them, I guess? How would that be done? By promoting new zoning, new zones, or?
What is your feeling about economic development in town? Is it adequate? Is it adequate? Should it be encouraged, or should it be limited?
Well, but then we want to get it, should it be allowed in new areas?
Well, that's another question.
Another
First-
question.
Yeah.
First, you'd say, should we do it? And then, should we do it? How do
If
we-
there's a yes response to that, then we'll go this way. If there's a no response, then we don't have to.
So that would be on 11.
So we're saying, what is your opinion about increasing, about the current economic development?
Right.
Increase?
Economic opportunity, the level of economic development. Should it be encouraged to increase, or should it be limited to decrease? Or is it adequate?
We have that on 8, right?
That would do the economic, local level economic reach.
Yeah, and that, but an aid is active, inactive, but you have to do it for adequate now, more or less.
All right, so we're going to take out that question. for
Yeah,
example.
right.
And active set list.
We can't really say, should it be decreased, can we? Because we're not going to be able to decrease it, but we could say.
Or limited, should economic, future, because we're talking about future
Okay,
economic opportunities. Should it be encouraged? Is it the opportunity adequate now, or should it be limited? And maybe it should be preceded, should our zoning regulations be modified to encourage, or should they be modified to limit, or are they just hunky-dory right now?
Don't drink on it.
Right, well, that's, where do you fall on this continuum?
Now, do we put hunky-dory in as?
No.
Or that, hunky dory.
Or is it,
Nifty.
just don't change anything, what it is. I like it.
so my notes are going to be a mess, and at the next meeting, we'll have to, correct what I misunderstood.
Yeah, but we'll have them though, we'll have something
Yeah, I-
to clean up.
It'll be something to pull apart.
Yeah, I think that's,
I'm excited about that.
Okay.
On the side, have you received any comments from outside the board in terms of these? I know you just said it out, but. Obviously, we have an audience today, so.
Right.
Curious.
People are paying a lot to watch us, right?
Yeah.
It's better. It's better to get time to watch the video. So what we're talking about actually is playing into your number 9, or revising the ideas in number 9.
I took out all of those things because people said they were all leading questions. So I figured we can start with a clean slate or revise it all or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think we should leave it open-ended, the way we've been just talking about it,
Okay.
which is, you know, should there go, so you have it, one question as to whether you want to have economic opportunity encouraged or not, or it's okay. And then, should we change it? Are there places in town where, or talk about the locations of, should it be townwide, should it be limited, should economic, new economic opportunities be?
Should there be new areas in town where business will be allowed? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
So,
think it short.
Yeah.
short and sweet.
To the
And maybe
point,
to
but-
say, should the village be encouraged to develop to its full potential, or something like that? Should it,
That's pretty leading.
Yeah.
well, or, okay.
Well, the question is whether we should limit the village to just the loop, the way it is now. And Tara was thinking maybe to spread it out to allow economic opportunities, business opportunities, in more than just the loop.
Right, and I think she was suggesting having, you know, maybe 3 or 4 different, or 5 different districts. So that if we had a village loop district, and we had a Route 16B district, and we had a, you know, we could have 2 or 3, or we could have more than 2 districts, we could have 3 or 4. or
Okay,
5
so
districts.
if we go back to what I had as my first thought, should some areas of town be developed with a higher density?
Mhm.
Right.
That way, I don't think you're leading people to downtown, uptown,
It's an
across
open
town.
question.
But it's just a
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
you know, do you want to head in that direction? Because if from this, if we get responses, we still have to craft the wording of what we do, which I think, and then that goes to the town.
Right.
Right, Tom.
We don't have to be
So we don't have to answer all the questions as we're
Right.
here, right? All we have to do is ask them.
Yeah. Okay. So with our phrasing of questions, we could include, for example, some of those ones from Easton about, is current intensity of commercial activity appropriate? That kind of thing. Rather than make it sort of the leading question of strongly agree or disagree or whatever. What is more intensive commercial development appropriate?
For compiling results, it would be easier to do it with strongly agree, disagree, obviously.
Right?
Yeah, simplify.
Well, I think we do need to have some open-ended questions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's,
I went through these results, and he has, there was a question at the end which says additional comments or issues that you want, and there are, in this report, the whole last pages are just everybody's, the type of comments, the comments verbatim of what was put there. And is You know, some of, at that time, it was, the Snowflake Inn was controversial. It was before we moved the library, before the Whitney Center and all that, so there was town buildings, that's when we were trying to figure out, what are we gonna do with all these buildings? So those issues came up. And then there's, quite a few people said, hey, we like it the way it is, don't change anything. But I think by having open-ended questions, you will get some ideas.
Yeah, because here it says commercial development should be regulated by the planning board. 80% agreed, 6% disagree.
It's certainly easier to calculate when it's that way.
I mean, you expect that, though, wouldn't you? I mean, might as well hire the,
How about question number 12? How can we phrase that in a way that's going to be understandable to people?
you gotta be careful about singling out two establishments there.
Mm-hmm.
They should be.
Also, I mean, I think the reason they're there is so people know what you're talking about.
Right, I understand, yeah, but they might think that's the only two, you know, or a special, you know, you get that favoritism thing going.
Well,
So you could say examples of such, example of such structures include inns and hotels,
that's here.
Recreation facilities.
okay.
Just so you're not putting in.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right, if you're gonna be
Right.
specific, it's like candidates,
Skiing.
like every candidate that has a dollar in it. They word it.
Recreational areas, I mean, there really are only two that I can think of primarily. Jackson's Peak Road, which is permitted in the village, and Black Mountain, which is not permitted. So recreational areas,
But if it burned down,
What about
it's
with
rebuilt
work?
in 6 years, it's okay.
but that's permitted, okay, but that's permitted
That's
too.
permitted?
Yeah.
Right?
Sorry,
And
Lynn.
it's only, if they burnt,
Yeah,
they could be rebuilt in 6 years.
Yeah.
And you zone them.
is it 6 years? I
Yes, it
forget.
is.
Okay.
About the same footprint though, right?
But this is more a question of whether we should allow
Yeah.
change expansion.
Yeah, for example, you know, Eagle Mountain House, for example, what if they wanted to build another structure behind them? They wanted to buy the land behind them and put in
I
cabins
was gonna say they don't
or
get
something. Yeah, they don't have much land, but there is that whole, we had that guy, whose first name began with A, and he has 170 acres or something other behind Eagle Mountain House. What if the Eagle bought 20 or 50 or whatever acres and set up cabins? They're not permitted to do that now, but do we want to prevent them from doing that? Maybe not.
Judging by Tara's map, which shows the parcels of existing commercial use in yellow, you've got Black Mountain Ski Area, you've got, off on, bed and breakfast,
Maybe
Windy Hill, Black Mountain, and
just get even.
Windy Mountain, and we have Christmas Farm.
Patterns on chin.
Carter Notch Inn,
You can
Windy
buy
Mountain House.
You've got the-
But Wentworth is in the village as well.
We could say golf courses and recreational areas or something like that. Because Eagle Mountain House golf course, I guess, is
Mm.
maybe not permitted, I guess. Golf courses and ski areas. Give the.
That's what we were at.
No, it's at the golf course,
Like
like,
reopen Tyrol.
yeah, Tyrol Spruce.
Well, you could just say such as, I mean, there are
You could just say.
inns and commercial recreation.
Okay,
Yes, I like those words.
Good words. Commercial properties.
Yeah, well, that's what is done in Yellow which were all either inns,
Or ski
hotels,
areas.
or recreation, or golf course and ski area.
That would include, the village districts.
See, I have, it's not.
I mean, you have commercial activity which occurs, but under the commercial, it's customary business. But that, they're very limited on that.
yeah.
Because
You
it
can't
has
have more than 3 employees or something, is that what
And
you
it has
mean?
to be, the building has to be used, the majority of it has to be used for residential, as opposed to business. Which actually, I can think of 2 instances where that regulation prevented a couple of businesses, which then had moved out.
That might be a separate question, should, we want to promote the home-based businesses,
Yeah.
expansion of home-based businesses.
Okay.
Who knows how many you're working on, they don't want to do.
That's right.
Oh, when you get right.
A lot of people do it, I don't know.
Yeah, there are,
Yeah.
there are several people who
Mhm.
telecommute, I mean, and maybe once a week, go to the office or.
Steve Pietro works right there. So you probably would too. Most of your stuff.
I wish I could.
There's nothing about online conference. Just stay home.
Surgery.
Yeah.
They do it all by computer and screens now.
Yes, they said it was we have 60% savings in healthcare costs, and doctors can stay home, do the right prescriptions and everything. You know, don't have to have an office. You have to touch it.
Out there are.
Okay, so we got down how, got through 11.
Just-
Satisfied with the words for 12? Betsy, you have alterations to 12?
I certainly do, I've got more than anybody.
Yeah, but I
Or air out of it.
I'm trying to look it up.
mean, and then let's have a workforce housing.
You know, it might be with workforce housing that instead of having a town-by-town approach, really should be looked at as from a regional perspective. In that,
I'm not sure what you're saying.
well, that instead of each town needing to
Provide.
provide, is that there are some towns where it would be
Beneficial.
easier,
Cheaper.
cheaper.
And doable.
Regionally, instead of like that.
Yeah.
Well, I know North Country Council, early on, after the court decision, developed regional, quote-unquote, needs for the various towns. But so if it were regional, are we gonna send money to Conway to help them build low-cost housing? Probably not.
No, we'll just be happy when they do it.
So they're very nice, thank you letter.
That's right.
But when Sarah's saying, well, some places are more adaptable to it
Yeah.
than others.
Sure, and Jackson's very hard, granted, to develop, but at the same time, do we want to risk not having enough young families here that the school has to close or something like that? I mean,
It's not just workforce.
it isn't just workforce, and, you know, even if you do consider workforce, it's not somebody earning $20,000 a year or $40,000 a year.
They don't pay a working wage in the valley, never have.
Well,
I've been here 52 years as of today.
somebody getting the lowest wages in the valley won't be able to buy workforce housing anywhere.
That's right.
Not in Jackson either, and maybe won't be able to rent anywhere. It's just not set up that way. Even if we have people building workforce housing here, the income level is going to be much higher than what a lot of people earn. So it's not that we're going to be sending a bus down to Manchester to pick up people who can't afford to buy a home.
Nobody's something to do.
Well, you know, we're not going to be able to help people with low incomes in Berlin. But somebody who's got an income of $45,000 a year, if, you know, a couple of people working and earning that, they could afford to buy a house in Jackson if we had some sort of workforce housing.
Has the workforce housing that we have in the zoning ordinance, has that been used at all?
No.
There's a lot of apartments in Jackson.
Yeah. I remember when we did the workforce housing ordinance proposal, and Mike Mallett was on the board at one point, he thought the ordinance was written in a way where it would encourage development. And we've just hit a really down market ever since then.
There
So,
hasn't been much development, period.
right.
The economy sucks.
But maybe once it picks up again, maybe somebody will take advantage of some of the provisions.
I think we're just trying to ask the question, though, right? We're
Yeah.
not going to solve the problem.
Right, that's what I was gonna get back to, is we've got to ask the question and get the dialogue going.
Yeah, because when
But
Kathleen
we
and I
don't
were
have to
talking
have
about
the
it,
answers right now.
I think Kathleen was saying that people don't know the issue. People don't think about the fact that their own children couldn't afford to live here. And so I know there was something about trying to educate them. How do we do that?
Yeah, but most kids won't stay in.
Well, maybe not.
I guess I think we're really talking more about affordable housing. You know,
Yeah.
When you say workforce housing and exclude sort of, you know, families and et cetera, you're talking about,
Transient population.
Yeah.
but dormitory or apartment complexes.
Yeah.
For workforce housing?
If,
Affordable.
no, I'm saying if there's affordable housing, there's workforce housing. Affordable housing can encompass, you know, workforce, but when you say workforce
Talking
housing, I'm
about
thinking more of,
elderly housing.
you know, an apartment complex or dormitory style housing, which I don't think is likely to happen here. So I think it's important.
What is that housing across from near Allen Furniture?
Evergreen?
Yeah. That's sort of low income.
It is.
Oh,
Affordable.
the apartment complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that affordable housing there?
They call it workforce housing, I think, but it is,
Whatever.
yeah, it is designed to be within the income guidelines.
So you have to be within.
You have to be within the income guidelines.
To get it.
And it's 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments for rent,
But it's rent, not, you can't.
not to buy. I think it'd be great if Jackson could do it to buy. I remember having the hearing and one of the people said, oh, so you're not talking about rental, there won't be toys in the yard? Which I felt was a non sequitur, but,
Toys in my yard.
No more lies.
Right. But I guess I was saying, I
Toys.
think
We all
what
have toys.
we're really talking about are young families moving in and having,
Right.
you know, to support the school, you know, teachers that can live in town. I don't think what we're really talking about is we are, you know, the staff that Wentworth going to
Right, exactly.
live.
so maybe to say Jackson has.
Affordable housing.
So maybe to say Jackson has an ordinance to assist with younger families or senior citizens occupying lower cost housing.
I want to move
No,
to
no,
senior
I don't
citizens.
think so.
No.
Like young people.
Okay.
I don't think
It's
Childbearing
most of the
age.
senior citizens
That's
are.
That wasn't what I was talking about outside, that's
It's
right.
going to get in trouble. I don't need that, but I don't think that they go together. I think that senior citizens housing is a totally different subject.
Okay.
That's more convenience.
Well, it is, and it's also a different
Assisted
structure.
living.
You're not doing a multi-level
Well,
senior citizens home. Put it on one floor, with some central stuff.
like everywhere.
Okay, so I'm going to work some of that. How about the end of that number 13? Is that quote unquote education acceptable or is that bad?
What, is it
The sum of Jackson's fire crew, teachers, etc.
no, I don't think you have to put that in.
You could get a little more general and say, you know, some of Jackson's service personnel or, you know, rather
Okay?
than, you know, say teachers, we have so few teachers, you know,
Right.
you're almost calling them out by name. and everything.
Plus the-
Same with
The town core and all that, get a damn good salary.
Yeah, but often they can't afford to live in Jackson even so.
Well, you have to wait.
All you're doing is asking if they want to participate. That's the bottom line of that question.
And, yeah, you don't
You know,
have
they're
to
not, they're not
put any
committed to it.
people in.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
New questions that we haven't covered. Anything on the eastern,
I like the redistricting question. I think Tara made that point in the master plan. And, I don't know how you want to word it, but something to throw down the pipe in the future.
How would you phrase it, John?
I just said I don't know how to phrase it. Would you be in favor in, redistricting town?
should there be some areas in town?
Yeah.
where- No, should some areas of town be developed with a higher density? No. You're
Is-
right, it's a brand new
the,
question.
when you say redistricting, I mean, obviously it's one way to bring in more economic development. What other changes
Well,
could?
Could be workforce housing, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you could say something like, are you in favor of redistricting
Or
Jackson to
expanding.
expand economic development, to expand affordable housing, et cetera, or not in favor of?
Yeah.
Okay, changing the districts. Are you in favor of changing?
And maybe they don't know what the districts are, maybe we should state where the districts are. We have the village district that's here, it goes up 16 versus all over rural residential.
Oh, we also have a river conservation district.
Yeah. But that's kind of an overlay, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
say, time
But yeah, we have a bubble in there if you want some.
Oh. We have a bubble.
Well, it's a jug thing, you know,
Yeah.
office things.
So what I can try to do is to rework this and then email it around to people as soon as I can, so that we can get some feedback here. Okay,
I think that's a wonderful idea.
okay.
Would anybody like to work further on this at this time? Well, then I propose we button up this work session. Thank you very much for all showing up. I think
Pleasure,
it's
thank you.
important. But it got to be, this is the only way we've really got to act on it.
These are actually,
It wasn't getting done.
yeah. Ice? Cool. Ice it. Are you cold? Oh, I'm warm. Yeah. Pretty. Whatever it was, whatever. Ice age.